Right. You feel ready? All right. Well, welcome everyone. We've got a few more folks signing on, but we're gonna, for the sake of everyone's time and eagerness to learn all about what you should know when your child turns 18, I just want to welcome you. I'm Erin Murphy, a post-secondary counselor at Libertyville High School. And we're just glad to have you here tonight. I think if we can ask everyone to make sure you are muted. And then we are recording and we will share slides tonight. And we also want to ask that if you have questions as the presentation moves forward, go ahead and drop those in the Q&A so that we can track questions and mark those answered. And I will let my colleague at Vernon Hills say hello. And then
hi everyone, good evening. We are really excited to have Caren and Alan from Shire Law Group back with us back again this year. It's been a super valuable presentation for parents whose students are on the brink of turning 18, and there's a lot to think about, and it's nice to have two experts who will tell us all that you need to know and consider as your child turns 18 and a lot of cases is heading off to college. So Caren and Alan, thanks for being with us, and Erin and I will sign off. And parents, families, if you, like Erin said, if you want to ask a question that benefits the whole audience, just throw that in the Q&A and I think they'll get to those eventually. Thank you.
So big shout out to Erin and Becky for coordinating and having us this evening. We are thrilled to be here this evening to present what you must know when your child turns 18. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to join us. As introduced, I'm Caren Naidoff.
And I'm Alan Press, and Caren and I are partners at Shire Law Group, right down the street in Lincolnshire. And we are an estate planning firm. So this is primarily what we do. We prepare wills and trusts and powers of attorney and healthcare directives. Some of the things we're going to be talking about this evening. We're very excited to bring this presentation. And as Caren pointed out, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. And we may wait a few minutes and kind of group them together. But we will get to everyone's questions. And if for some reason we don't, please feel free to contact us. Our information is up on the screen. You have our emails there, and you have our phone number as well. So if for some reason you have a question that we didn't address, please feel free to reach out to us after the fact. We also are going to be making the slides available, and this presentation is being recorded. So you should be able to contact your respective schools and get access to that video, or certainly you could reach out to us as well, and we'll make sure that you get that. So with that, I guess we'll get started.
All right. So thank you again for joining us. We have a lot of parents that have juniors, and many of you have seniors, and some of you joining us this evening have students that are younger. So we're thrilled to have you all here with us. So we're here to talk about what happens on your child's 18th birthday, what you need to know. So for those who have seniors that are going to be graduating soon, congratulations to you and to your family. So some of your children are going to be graduating and heading to college. Some of your children are going to be traveling. Maybe they're close to home or they're traveling further away. Some of your children will be starting a new job. And some of your children will be moving, maybe close to home, maybe far away in an apartment or a dorm. But most likely, it's a combination of a few of these things. No matter what direction your child is headed in, there is one thing that we all share in common when our children turn 18, and that is that they are now considered legal adults. And with that designation comes some very important changes for them, for you, and for your family as a whole. And we're going to talk about those changes this evening. This chart that we have up demonstrates the changes before your child became a legal adult at 18, and then after your child becomes a legal adult at 18. So before 18, you could access your child's medical records. So if you had a question about your child's vaccination history, for example, you could call up to the doctor's office, you could ask about that vaccination history, and you could see if your child was up to date. After 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could make decisions about the course of your child's medical treatment. So if your child was in an activity, fell, got hurt, you could, on your child's behalf, discuss with the doctor what the medical treatment for that injury was going to be. And after 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could speak to your child's doctor. So if your child wasn't feeling well, you could call up to the nurse, to the doctor, and relay your child's medical condition and symptoms, and you, along with the nurse or the doctor, could decide on the course of treatment. And after 18, when your child becomes a legal adult, that right changes. Before 18, you could help your child with finances. So if your child had a bank account and got a statement and they didn't understand something within that statement, you could, on your child's behalf, call up the bank and try to get things sorted out. And after 18, that right changes. The next one's a tough one. Before 18, you could access your child's educational records. And after your child becomes a legal adult at 18, that right may change in some ways. And we're going to discuss that as well this evening. So what is a parent to do? Well, there's 3 essential documents. They're health care and financial powers. And we're going to talk about those this evening, as well as discussing FERPA. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and that is what governs a parent's access to their child's student educational records once they become 18. And we also wanted to bring you some additional topics this evening. When we do this presentation, we brought it out to the community. There's some common additional concerns that we get that we wanted to do proactively a discussion about. One is wills and trusts, and Alan's going to talk about that this evening, as well as talking about access to digital assets. And then I am going to touch on dorm, apartment, and global insurance and health and safety apps. But first, we're going to get started with the 3 essential documents regarding healthcare and financial access. Those 3 documents are a healthcare power of attorney, a HIPAA authorization, and a power of attorney for property. And we're going to take each of these documents one at a time. We're going to start out with that healthcare power of attorney. So a parent cannot make medical decisions on behalf of their adult child, even in an emergency, unless proper authorization has been put in place. That proper authorization is the healthcare power of attorney. The healthcare power of attorney is what gives parents or a designated individual the authority to make medical decisions on an adult child's behalf. When we do these documents for our young adult clients, one of the first questions that is asked of us is, I don't want to sign anything where I'm giving up my own rights to make my own decisions. None of these documents waive or supersede the adult child's right to make their own decisions. But authorization becomes especially important in the event that your adult child is unable to make his or her own medical decisions for one reason or another. So what would happen if these documents weren't in place? Well, you might have to go to court to get a guardianship. So having that healthcare power of attorney in place avoids the expense and aggravation of potentially having to go to court to have the ability to make medical decisions on your adult child's behalf when they cannot make their own medical decisions. And in the midst of a crisis, the only thing that a parent wants to be able to focus on is their child and being able to make decisions that might be necessary in the midst of that situation. So this healthcare power of attorney is an extremely important document to put in place once your children turn 18. So my girlfriend had a child who was her eldest, who was going to a very large university. And my friend was concerned about her acclimating and how she was going to do first time away from home. So she recommended that her child join a recreational team. And her daughter loved that idea, decided to join the soccer team, was having a great time meeting people, really liked the girls that she was meeting on her team. One practice, she collided with one of her team members and she was hurt very badly. So here she is at University Health Services. She is away from home for the first time. She's with doctors she doesn't know. She is in a lot of pain. She can't really appreciate what is being told to her or what decisions need to be made. She really needed my friend, her mom, to step in and make medical decisions for her. Well, fortunately, my friend had her documents in place and all lined up, and she was very easily able to send these documents because she had them electronically right to where they needed to get to so she could make important decisions on behalf of her child. When we do these documents for our young adults, we always do them electronically as well. It is very important that when you do these documents, you have them in a place you can easily access them, because if something happens to your child, you are going to want to immediately be able to attend to any decisions that need to be made. So you're going to want to be able to send these immediately to wherever they need to get to. The second document is the HIPAA authorization, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And you've all filled out many HIPAAs. Every time you go to the doctor, you're going to have to fill out a HIPAA authorization and update information. The HIPAA allows healthcare providers to release and share medical information with designated people. So powers of attorney are decision-making documents like the power of attorney for healthcare, the ability to make medical decisions on behalf of your adult children. HIPAA is just about information, and it allows doctors to speak about a student or an adult child's medical condition with whomever that adult child designates on their HIPAA authorization form. There's like the first paragraph on HIPAA. You can have named as many people as you want to name that adult child, and anybody that's named on the HIPAA authorization will be allowed to receive protected healthcare information because the child has released who's ever going to deliver that information. They're known as covered entities. So either a doctor or a hospital, for example, to whoever is authorized. So this HIPAA authorization becomes crucial if your adult child is admitted to a medical facility and you need to get information about their condition, especially if they are not able to speak with you directly about their condition, or they cannot fully relay medical information to you. So people ask us, why do we need a general HIPAA authorization if every time we go to the doctor's office, we fill one out? Well, what happens if your child is admitted to a facility or is in a doctor's office that they've never been in before, and at the time they enter, they're unable for one reason or another to fill out the necessary paperwork, and they're unable to say, hey, it's okay if these people call, you can tell them what's going on. So the HIPAA authorization, this general one, becomes very important. At a time of crisis, again, your primary concern is going to be ensuring that your child is taken care of, and you do not want that potential additional burden of a court proceeding or any associated legal costs for that. So throughout this presentation, I have examples of my two children. Alan has no such examples, but I do. And they are true examples.
I think it's just a matter of luck, that's all.
So I've had to use this HIPAA authorization and for my son. So my son had gone to a large university, and I don't know if you'll have a similar result, but my children, both of them, when they got sick and they were at school, we would urge them to go to get seen. And there was one reason or another that they would give. Either they couldn't find a good time slot, or they had class, or they had an event. So my son was sick in the beginning of the week, and we'd urged him to go get seen. He didn't go. And by the end of the week, we got a call not to worry, that he was headed to the emergency room, that he was really sick, that he had brought his phone, but he only had one battery left for his charger on his phone. And his friend had his phone, so he was going to keep me up to date with what was going on. So I was panicked, obviously, and I was waiting for the message from his friend. And finally, his friend texted me and said, I can't give you any information because they won't give me any because I'm not authorized to know what's going on. So at that point, I called the nurses station at that hospital, and I said that I was his mom and could I please get information? And they said they would not even tell me if he was admitted unless the proper authorization was sent to them. So fortunately, I had my electronic copies of my documents. I sent that HIPAA, called the nurses station back, and immediately she was able to tell me what was going on. So I can tell you firsthand how important this HIPAA authorization is, as well as all of these other documents.
Thanks, Caren. So Caren talked about the healthcare directives, the power of attorney for healthcare, and the HIPAA authorization form. Now we're going to change gears and take a look at the power of attorney for property. And think of property in the broadest sense of the word. So this is a financial power of attorney. And it basically allows whomever is designated on the form as the agent to handle the young adult's finances if they're unable to do that themselves. And like the healthcare power of attorney, this becomes critical if an adult child becomes injured or is ill to the extent that they couldn't make these decisions themselves. If these forms are not in place, then like the healthcare situation, the only remedy that you would have as a parent would be to go to court and petition the court to become the guardian of their estate if they needed assistance with any financial matters. So again, having these forms in place is quite easy to do, and it's great insurance to make sure that you have the authorizations available in order to act on behalf of your adult child if you needed to do that. And the power of attorney for property can really handle a lot of different things. It can handle bank accounts, it can handle, brokerage accounts, investments. It can handle issues with taxes or a safe deposit box. So really the powers are meant to be as broad as possible. And I do want to mention that this form, the power of attorney for property and the power of attorney for healthcare, are actually statutory forms that were devised by the Illinois legislature. So these forms are available online, but if you wind up doing these yourselves for your adult child, just exercise some caution because they do need to be witnessed and perhaps notarized in certain circumstances and for certain forms. So you want to make sure that you're getting all of that correct. But the forms are available. We do of course, we recommend using a lawyer in preparing these forms. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how we do that. And we'll give you a little bit of information as to what the costs would be as well. But the bottom line is you could do it yourself. But if you do that, you want to be careful. We do like the ideas of lawyers doing them because when we prepare the forms, we add additional powers. We make some changes to the form that we think are going to be especially beneficial for a young adult, somebody who is leaving home and either starting their first job or going to college and they're going to be away from home. You want to make sure that you have those protections in place. So some of the things that the power of attorney, again, can handle, what happens if a letter comes from the IRS and your child is unable to answer it, maybe because they're incapacitated, or maybe because they're just unavailable. Maybe they're studying abroad or they're at school far away and it's not easy for them to handle this. So having a power of attorney for property or a financial power of attorney and making it effective immediately so it could be used in all types of situations is really a great idea. The form can also be used for banking, really anything financial related. It could be used for dealing with the Department of Motor Vehicles or signing any type of legal forms. So when you have a power of attorney for property, we do recommend making it as broad as possible, just because in life, you just never know what's going to be around the corner. And in Illinois, like many other states, you could have a problem if a specific power is not provided for in the document. There could be an argument made that the agent isn't going to be able to do that for the young adult because they don't have the specific authority in the document to do that. So we're big fans of making this form as broad as possible. Another thing that we do as attorneys is something that's not included on the financial power of attorney in Illinois is access to digital assets. So this is something that we add when we create the form as an additional power. And we always tell families that this should be like the plan B. If your young adult is going off to college or they're leaving home, you maybe want to set up a password management system. So if something were to happen, you would have the login and the password to go online and help them out. That's going to work much better than depending on the power of attorney, right? But we want to have this power specifically provided for anyway in the document in case that password management system either fails or doesn't exist. You want there to be another way to be able to get online and to help them if that's going to be required. I did mention that the forms that we're talking about are Illinois forms. The HIPAA form is more of a national type form, but the powers of attorney that we use are the Illinois forms. And people ask, well, that's great, but my adult child is going to school in Pennsylvania or in Washington, D.C., or they're going to California or Montana. Does it make sense to do the forms here? Shouldn't they have them done in the state that they're going to? And certainly that's an option, but not a requirement, because we're big proponents of having this taken care of as soon as possible after your child turns 18. They have to be 18 in order to sign any of these documents. But once they head off to school or whatever they're doing, they're going to be very busy. And if you can get this done beforehand, if they turn 18 before they head off for college, let's say, you want to probably get that done. And then these forms, as long as they're properly executed, they're going to be honored in all 50 states. So you're not going to have to worry about, being in Pennsylvania and the power of attorney, which is an Illinois form, is not going to be honored there. That's not true. It will be. It's valid in all 50 states, again, as long as it's executed properly under Illinois law. And one of the benefits of using an attorney is making sure that it is executed properly and everything is witnessed and notarized the way it's supposed to. We have a question. Can these forms be created before they turn 18? And the answer, well, you can create them, they just can't be signed. So we do have some families that will contact us maybe a month or two before their adult or soon to be adult child is going to turn 18. And we can get started on the process, although we don't need that much time. But we're happy to get started on the process. But we generally then schedule an appointment for the signing either on their 18th birthday. And Caren can confirm that we do get a lot of people come in on their 18th birthday. We can probably think of a lot of better ways to spend your 18th birthday than in a lawyer's office, but we do make it as enjoyable as possible. We have like a little gift and all that. So, and it only takes about 45 minutes. So it's not a big time commitment, but you do need to be 18 before you can sign the documents. We also have a question, are these forms honored internationally? For the most part, yes, but we can't make any representation like that because there's so many different countries and so many different laws and rules. If you are part of a program, we recommend contacting the sponsors of the program to see if there's any special forms. Like if you know you're going to be in Spain for the semester or something like that, there may be something that you can do. You also have to consider the fact that if you're in a foreign country and they don't speak English, I mean, there might be a translation issue that you have to worry about. So we can't make a statement like they're going to be honored everywhere, but certainly in all 50 states and in most, westernized English-speaking countries, I think that there shouldn't be a problem. We do have one more. Caren, let's see. How about a power of attorney or any other form that can provide cover for matters other than for finance and health related? If you could expand on that question a little bit, because I'm not really sure what you mean. We are going to be talking about the FERPA in a few minutes, which gives rights to obtain educational information. But if there's something in specific that's not covered under the healthcare power of attorney or the power of attorney for finance, if you want to just maybe direct us to that area, and we'd be happy to answer the question again in a few minutes.
So this power of attorney for property, the power of attorney for healthcare, the HIPAA authorization, it's all about you having peace of mind. Hopefully you never need to utilize any of these documents, but if you need them, it is very important that you have them in place because they allow you to make immediate decisions and give you access to critical information should a crisis occur. And then that allows you to focus on whatever the situation is, whatever needs to be done. Documents are easy to put in place. So when you're making your list of everything that needs to get done when your child is heading to school or once your child becomes a legal adult, this should be at the top of the list. Copies of the documents, the originals, you can just keep in a safe and easily accessible place. But as we said before, electronic copies of all of these documents are just as good as the original. So the electronic copies can be sent anywhere they need to get to. Once your child turns 18, as is considered a legal adult, in addition to limitations on your ability to have access to their medical and their financial affairs, there are limitations to your rights as far as looking at and access to student records. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and FERPA governs access to a student's record. There's a lot of misinterpretation about FERPA. A lot of people think it's only about having access to grades. It is about having access to your child's entire student record. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. This next slide demonstrates the differences before your child becomes a legal adult and after they become a legal adult at 18 for FERPA. So before 18, you could view your child's educational records, and after 18, that right changes without the proper authorization in place. Before 18, you could request a correction to your child's educational records, and after 18, that right changes without proper authorization in place. Before 18, you could decide who could see your child's educational records. And again, after 18, when your child becomes a legal adult, that right changes without the proper authorization in place. And before 18, you could get photocopies of your child's educational records. And after 18, that right changes without the proper authorization in place. So there's a common theme here. Proper authorization, and that proper authorization is written consent. And FERPA has a specific written consent where a child releases the ability for a university or a college administrator or somebody on that staff to be able to speak to a parent about their record, their whole student record. So for example, if your child was at school and they were having trouble acclimating and they confided in an administrator at that school, and that administrator was concerned about their mental health, for example, they would not be able to reach out to a parent, even if they thought that it was prudent, without the FERPA authorization in place. So there are some very tragic stories for students who didn't have FERPA consent forms in place. These FERPA consent forms are held at the registrar's office. Sometimes the university or the college that students are going to be attending might have their own FERPA form, and Sometimes their FERPA form includes additional things like the ability to take their image for different marketing purposes. But we always do backup FERPA forms for all of our young adults who are going to be heading to college. It is per college. So if your student has a FERPA form at one college and transfers or goes to graduate school and it's at a different university or college, they will need a FERPA form for that other additional school. So it is by school. So most important thing to do is to call the registrar's office if you're not sure if the school that your child's attending has a FERPA authorization that maybe your child checked off without realizing when they're applying to school, but you want to make sure that a FERPA authorization is in their records. So we also wanted to bring you these common concerns that have been raised as we've done this presentation throughout communities. And people would ask us about wills and trusts and access to digital assets. We've had questions before about insurance and health and safety apps. So Alan's going to start out with a discussion about wills and trusts and access to digital assets. And I will follow up with a discussion about insurance and those health and safety apps.
Thanks, Caren. So we already explored the powers of attorney, the healthcare, and the financial. Those are one essential element of estate planning. Having a will and trust is another. But the question is, does a young adult need to have a will or a trust? So to answer that question, let's just quickly define what those documents are. Most of us kind of know what a will is. Of course, that's a document, and generally it's going to state where you want to leave your assets or to whom you want to leave your assets to after you pass away. One important thing to note, the powers of attorney that we discussed in the HIPAA form, those are only valid during lifetime. So when somebody passes away, the power of attorney is no longer valid. The will is the exact opposite. It's only effective after somebody passes away. So it has no effect during somebody's lifetime. So if somebody gets sick or incapacitated or hurt, the power of attorney is going to be the document that's going to be relied upon. And after somebody passes away, it's going to be the will that's going to be relied upon. And the will is going to, again, direct how that person wanted their assets to be distributed. A trust, in contrast, is something that is also a legal document, of course. It's effective upon signing. So it's effective during lifetime, like powers of attorney, and it's also effective after death as well. So it's kind of like a super document. It handles both situations. So again, it can handle, what happens if I become incapacitated? This is how I want my assets to be handled for my benefit while I'm still alive. And then after I pass away, I want my assets to be handled in this particular manner, to be distributed out to my beneficiaries in the way that I've directed in the document. So those are some basic definitions of a will and a trust. Then the question becomes, well, that's great, but does my adult child need to have either one of these documents? And really the answer is going to be, of course, it depends, right? So if they have their own independent wealth, they've either inherited money or maybe they were, trading a Bitcoin or something in the middle of the night during high school and they have a large amount of wealth, that's great. Then they may want to consider having a will or a trust to handle the disposition of those assets if they were to pass away. If they have a more normal, typical 18-year-old portfolio, maybe they have a couple of savings accounts or they have some money put away from their part-time job or whatever, then they may not necessarily need to put together a will or trust just yet. Typically, when they get a little bit older, when they get married or definitely when they have children, that is going to be a time where they're going to want to consider putting together a will. Also, there's some alternatives that might be available for somebody that has limited assets. That could be having a payable on death account. So they could have a bank account and they could list you or their other parent as the beneficiary payable on their death. So then you would be covered if something like that happened. They could also have a joint account, right? So if there's a joint account, you have an account and you're on it with your adult child. If something were to happen to you, they become the sole owner upon your death and vice versa. So that would also negate the need perhaps for that account to have a will or a trust. And also you have the possibility of beneficiary designations. So you could have a retirement plan or perhaps a life insurance policy. And if you have one of those things, you have an agreement either with the life insurance company or the custodian of the retirement plan that if you were to pass away, the money is going to be paid to the beneficiary or the beneficiaries that you have listed. So there are some substitutes available. If you have any questions in this regard, you certainly can reach out to us and we'd be happy to analyze that situation with you and determine whether putting together a will or a trust for your young adult is going to be something that's going to be important for them. Finally, in this topic, again, we want to make sure we're addressing digital assets. So if you are creating a will or a trust, you want to make sure that you're creating a document that gives the executor of the will, the person that's going to be in charge after you pass away, or the trustee of the trust, you want to give them the authority to handle digital assets as well. We do have a couple of questions, so we're going to pause for a moment and address these. Is all of this the same for a child with disabilities? Well, that would depend. It gets a little bit more complex in that situation. Somebody has to have the ability to sign legal documents. So they have to have an appreciation for what they're signing. We could have a whole seminar on what that means, but it pretty much is a case-by-case basis. But if your child with disabilities can have an understanding and appreciate what they're signing, they can create these documents just like any other child. If you wanted to discuss this further with us, we would be happy to do so, but it would take us a little bit down a tangent that we don't have time for this evening. But again, we're happy to discuss that with you separately. And then Caren, I'll direct this one to you. Can both parents be the power of attorney for health and property?
So on the power of attorney for healthcare and the power of attorney for property, in Illinois, you can only name one person at a time in the order that you want them to act. It doesn't mean that the people that are listed can't speak to one another, but they'll look to the first person named who's available to make the decision. If that person is not available, they'll go to the next person listed. But you can have different choices for the order in which you name people between your power of attorney for healthcare and the power of attorney for property. So perhaps your young adult would want to name, the mom first on financial and the dad second for the power of attorney for property. And in healthcare, they want to name, the dad first and then the mom second. So it's really up to that adult child. You just can't have co-agents or two people together. It has to be in the order named one at a time.
And we always say, well, go ahead, Caren, I'm sorry.
And in HIPAA, you can name as many people as you want. There is no rhyme or reason. Like if you name, a cousin who's third, that cousin has the same right to get information as the people that you listed first and second. So HIPAA, as many people as you want, there's no order for that document.
And we always say that even though you have to list one at a time, nothing, of course, would prevent the parents of a child from working together. It's just that if something needed to be signed, let's say for the financial power of attorney, they would call on the first person listed. And then if they weren't available, they would call on the second person listed. But we always assure parents that both of them could work together anyway. It's just there has to be one person who's designated as that decision maker.
wanted to have a little discussion about insurance. So things happen, you might want to consider insuring with dorm, apartment, or rental, and global insurance. Global insurance for those who have young adults who are going to be traveling, and that dorm, apartment, rental insurance for those young adults who are going to be leaving home and living in a dorm, an apartment. And I would say that these standalone policies for these insurances are relatively inexpensive. It's surprisingly how relatively inexpensive those standalone policies are. But your homeowners may also cover some of these types of insurance. So you want to look at the homeowners policy as well, and then compare the deductibles and see what makes the most sense for you and for your family. So I also have my other child, who is my second real life example this evening, about the importance of having insurance. My daughter went to school in the middle of Pennsylvania, very cold. And we had told both my son and my daughter before they went to school that they should never leave their computer unattended, because unfortunately things happen. And as we all know, their world is on their computer. It's where they get their assignments. It's where they do their papers. Everything's on there that's needed. And if they lose it, not only will their world be turned upside down, but yours would be as well. So we said to them, make sure that whatever you do, you know where your computer is at all times and it's with you. You don't leave it someplace. So my daughter was going to her favorite spot in the library, and she bundled up with her coat and her backpack with her computer, and she went off to her spot to study. And unlike me, when I went to college, I did not have Grubhub that would deliver food to me, but she did, and she was hungry and she got some food, and she went downstairs to get the food. She heeded the lesson not to leave her computer alone, so she took her computer with her. When she got back up to her spot with her food and her computer in hand, she saw that her coat had been stolen. So not only was she really devastated that somebody would steal her coat, but it was the middle of winter and she had no coat now. Fortunately, we had had dorm insurance, and that dorm insurance covered theft and the replacement of the coat. All she had to do was file a police report, and within 1 week, she had her coat, the exact coat, replaced. So for us, our insurance had paid for itself, and we knew that without that, it would have been a lot more chaotic. So this is something just to put on your list, see if it makes sense for you, look into it, just something to think about.
And Caren, we just have a brief question. Is there any way to access the PowerPoint and the recording? And yes, we are going to provide a PDF of the slides, and this recording will be made available. You can check afterwards, and we'll, I'm sure some information will go out to everybody who attended about the accessing of that information. So yes.
We also wanted to bring you this evening something that is at all of your fingertips. And this is something not only for your young adults, but for anyone in your family that you think it would be helpful for. This is the Medical ID app. It is a white square with a red heart in it. And if you have an iPhone, it is on your home screen. If you don't have an iPhone, you can download a similar health app onto your smartphone. The Medical ID app allows first responders to bypass a lock screen, whether it is a facial recognition or it is a code that you put in, numerical code, that first responder can get into whatever information you have placed in there. So this becomes extremely important if there is somebody who has an allergy to a medicine or to a food or has a condition that would be helpful for a first responder to know about. So we don't endorse using the Medical ID app or how much you put into it, but we wanted to bring it to your attention because it is something, again, that you have readily available if it would be something that would be helpful for you or anybody in your family. And then we also often get questions about safety apps and setting them up on your smartphones. And there are dozens and dozens of safety apps that you can download. The best thing that we feel is to definitely vet them, ask trusted individuals, other parents, what they are going to use or what they use for their children. Or if your children have friends that use certain safety apps that they think might work for your family. Again, it's very important to vet these apps, but some of the apps that I used for my children when they went off to college, Life 360 is fabulous. Find My Friends, follow my Uber, follow my walk. So there's many out there, but again, just take the time to vet them before you download them.
And just be careful not to abuse the power, because we do know of some people who were removed by their child from tracking them. So we don't want that to happen to you. We also wanted to just talk briefly about planning remotely. So we are allowed to do this. We have a special way of getting it done. So as I mentioned early in the presentation, we're located in Lincolnshire, so not too far away, just down the street on Milwaukee Avenue. But if planning is easier to be done from home or even to be done from the dorm room, that can be accomplished as well. There is a requirement that all parties doing a signing are going to be located in Illinois. That is a requirement. And there's some other things too that, but we have become very adept in the age of post-COVID in handling this. So that's always an option. We always love seeing people in the office. I think that is kind of the best way to get it done. I mean, nothing like the personal touch, but Zoom has been, as we're doing right now, is a great substitute. So it's a good way to also get it done and relay the information. And that kind of leads us to our procedure. So we do have a whole program for this. We charge a reduced price for the program. So the young adults, they pay $300 per student, and we produce all 4 documents. So that's going to be the power of attorney for healthcare, the HIPAA authorization, the power of attorney for property, and the FERPA authorization. And we have an online portal where the young adult can enter information, and then we prepare the documents, and then we set the appointment for them to either come in or we meet up with them on Zoom. We review everything with them. It takes about 40 minutes or so. And then if they're coming into the office, they leave with their documents, not only electronically, but also the paper originals and a set of hard copies. So it's a nice little system that we have. We really enjoy doing this work. It's one of our favorite things to do in the office. And it's usually the first time a young adult is hopefully interfacing with an attorney. And we want to make a good impression. So we really, and they have great questions too. These young adults, when we're explaining the documents, it's pretty unbelievable how attuned they are to everything and how smart they are, of course. So we, of course, they are adults and we treat them as adults. And we think it's a great process and something that you certainly can consider. But again, as I mentioned earlier, you could also do these things yourself if you were so inclined to do so.
So the most important gifts that you can give to your adult child once they turn 18 is to protect them with a power of attorney for healthcare, which is a power of attorney where if they cannot make their own medical decisions, they are designating those who can step in and make those on their behalf. A HIPAA authorization listing all of the people who are permitted to get information about their medical condition. Power of attorney for property, who can step in and help out with financial affairs if necessary. FERPA authorization, FERPA consent form to access educational records. A will or a trust if it's advisable. Look into insurance if it makes sense for you and your family, and check out the medical ID app as well and safety apps if you believe that that would also be helpful for your family. no matter how you get these documents done, it is very important that you put them in place and you put them in place properly. We cannot emphasize how important this is. They're relatively easy to put in place again. And once they're in place, it just gives you peace of mind. And again, hopefully you don't need to use them, but if you do, make sure that you have them electronically so you can send them wherever they need to get quickly so you can deal with whatever situation you need to deal with quickly.
And as Caren pointed out, we hope that you never need the forms, but do keep in mind that if they are needed and they're not in place, it might be too late to have them executed, right? So then your only remedy is going to be perhaps go to court to become a legal guardian. If you can avoid that by creating these forms at a fairly low cost, that's something that's definitely advisable. Again, we hope you never need them, but if you need them, you're going to be very glad that they're there, and they're going to definitely provide peace of mind when your adult child is heading off into the world.
So we're obviously very passionate about getting this information out to the community, and we are welcoming always questions that you might have. So if you are thinking about some of the things that we discussed this evening and a question comes to mind, please feel free to reach out to us. We are always happy to get questions and to answer them as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Caren and Alan. I think we hit up all the questions that had been in the Q&A, so I think we're good to go. And I know it was said multiple times, but just to reiterate, Aaron and I will be getting a copy of tonight's recording when it's ready. And then when we have that, we will send the link to the recording and a copy of the slides used tonight to families. So
Yeah,
anything
and
else,
we'll
Aaron?
get those to you, Becky and Aaron, tomorrow. We'll get you the slides. Okay.
That'd be amazing. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you have a good evening.
Thanks,
you
everybody. We
both.
really
Bye.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Caren. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys.
Take care.